Welcome to the Harmony in a Hurry podcast. We are Caroline and Anna, mindfulness enthusiasts, exploring ways to weave a little bit of mindfulness into our busy routine.
Our guest today is Flora Bowley. Flora is a celebrated painter, author of 4 books, and visionary guide known for her innovative and embodied approach to intuitive art making and her signature blend of life art practices. Flora's work is rooted in the belief that creativity belongs to all people and that creative expression opens channels for more aliveness and connected ways of being in our ever-changing world. We hope you enjoy it. I welcome Flora to coming on to our Harmony in a Hurry podcast, and thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. One question that we normally always ask people just to get started is, what does mindfulness mean to you?
Well, it's kind of an interesting word in that it conjures like full of mind, right? Just the word itself. But I often think it's our mind, at least the chattery version of our mind, that gets in the way of mindfulness. So I think it's in some ways sort of a parsing out of like which part of my mind do I really want to pay attention to? Because the part that wants to remind me to drop into my body and to connect to my heart and to the earth and to those kinds of things is the part that leads me into mindfulness. But then there's, all of this other stuff that can take me away from mindfulness. So yeah, I think for me, the senses come to mind when I think of mindfulness, what mindfulness means to me. It's often when I'm engaged in the touching, the smelling, the seeing, the feeling senses that are beyond just thinking. So yeah, there's so much more I know that we can share about it, but those are the things that come to mind off the top of my head.
Is that part of your practice, or do you get yourself into like a mindfulness space? Because I know you're obviously an intuitive artist and brilliant, I've got to say. So do you do certain things to get into that mindfulness space so that then you create more intuitively?
Yeah, I have some rituals that I tend to do like right before I go into a painting session, and things like moving my body, stretching, breathing. I often put my hand, just actually place my hands on my heart. Sometimes I'll light a candle or some incense just to sort of mark this threshold of moving into a painting session and out of a more day-to-day task kind of space. But I also really love this idea of like stitching mindfulness practices, like not having them be separate from our life necessarily. I think if we would have had this conversation like 15 years ago, I would have said like, oh, it's sitting on a meditation cushion or something where it's like this very obvious mindfulness practice. But how I feel about it now is that it's like standing in the line at the grocery store. Can I take a breath? Can I notice what's around me? Can I resist the urge to look at my phone? Can I really engage in the present moment? And I often say when I'm leading people through my painting practice that what it is a presence practice, and that it's an opportunity to really come into ourselves. And I feel like we live in a time where there's so much that's vying for our attention, and the idea of consuming is really prevalent in our culture. Like we're just like taking in media, we're taking in so much information. And so for me, the creative practice gives us this opportunity to actually coming into a space of I'm gonna be with myself. And that's why I love just that simple hands-on heart. It's like, hello, I'm here, I'm listening, and I'm present. And so, yeah, doing some of those kind of simple rituals prior to starting a painting session, but also I think living a life in which I'm sort of always prepping for a creative output. Like I think sometimes of this like inhale and exhale idea where When I'm moving through life, I'm inhaling inspiration, right? That's as if my whole life was a creative practice. And I'm kind of inhaling information so that when I do have a brush in my hand and I'm going to create something on a blank canvas, there's a lot there, there's a lot that's ready to come out. And so, yeah, I talk a lot in recent years about clearing the channel. And
Yeah.
so, this idea that like we have this life force, I always kind of imagine that in our belly area, just because it helps me visualize it more. And it's like if we have this aliveness, we have this spark, whatever word you want to use, and then the creative process is a way for that to move like outward, like up and out through
Mm.
the channel. Well, then it's interesting to consider what clogs the channel, the overconsumption of things like I was just speaking about, this not expressing emotions, just all the trauma, all the things that kind of get in the way of a creative flow and a connection to our aliveness. And so a lot of the practices that keep that channel open, I think, can be put under the umbrella of mindfulness.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I always think of it as a place to practice life, like living, that,
Mm.
if you think of just like a canvas and, creating something out of nothing, and from moment to moment to moment, we're making micro choices, and those micro choices are building on the last micro choices we,
Hmm.
chose, and constantly coming back to, well, what next? What feels most alive? Do I want to let this part go? Do I want to bring this part in? Do I want to turn the canvas upside down? Do I want to add a bunch of dark? It's like all of these things are metaphors. The way that I see it is that there's beautiful, endless array of ways that this practice of intuitive painting reflects life itself, and it gives us this really like safe place to practice, because I'm always telling my students, I'm like, remember, it's just canvas, it's just paint. We make it mean a lot sometimes, but really at the essence, it's just, we're pushing colors around, but through that process, we get to learn how to listen to our intuition, how to move from that place of spontaneity and trust and allowing versus forcing. Like all of these, kind of life lessons are just in there. And so it's such a cool thing. I think if you spend, you know, I often paint for like 4 or 5 hours at a time, and I think, wow, I've just been training myself this entire time to be more present, to be more courageous, to be more trusting of myself. Like these are the muscles that I'm flexing when I'm intuitive painting. And then when I go out into the world, I'm stronger in those ways. And then when I have things that might be less, like where my actions actually have a bigger impact on my life, I've actually been training in this place that gives me more reference point to how that feels in my body.
So then do you find when we all do have those things in our life that aren't necessarily very pleasant, let's put it under that umbrella, do you find then that you're able to express that more easily than with your art because you've been practicing mindfulness overall?
Yeah, I think like things like grief and sadness and like the harder emotions in life in
Mm.
general. Yeah. Yeah, I think again, like had we had this conversation like 15 years ago, I would have probably found myself talking more about how painting is like such an access point for joy and la la la, and it is. And I still believe that. And what is more and more true for me is that it is such a beautiful place to be able to work through all of what is stirring inside of us. And I'm so grateful that we have the creative outlet, if people learn how to use it, as a way to like metabolize and to feel and to move. And I think move is probably the key word there because it's so easy for things to pile up. And that's kind of goes back to that clearing the channel idea. It's like if we're going through hard thing after hard thing, whether it's in our personal life or it's in the world, and we're not actually moving that through our body in some way, it's very easy for the channel to get clogged. And then all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, it's usually quite gradual, we feel more disconnected from life. We feel like, I'm kind of looking at everything through like a film, maybe, or there's like an apathy or a fatigue, or I mean, you name it, the symptom, right? But there's a time and a place to just go, I'm gonna just let all these emotions come through right now and onto the canvas. And what a gift that is, really, that there's a way to do that, because I think for a lot of people, they just don't even know how to get it moved. It just becomes stagnant and sad and hard. And I do a lot of movement with my body when I'm painting. I always have music, really, and I'm kind of dancing, and I'm using big brushes and my hands, and it's this cathartic experience. And I love that the word cathartic actually has the word art right in the middle, because to me, that's what it is. And the interesting thing is that often when we do create in a way that is unbridled and really expressive and coming from a really raw, authentic place, it actually does look interesting. It carries the signature of aliveness. Whereas if you can imagine kind of like holding a brush really in a certain way and really trying to, I always think the word execute is interesting, because it's like if you're trying to execute something, you're also kind of killing it often. And I see this happen all the time in my retreats, where the more somebody tries, the more they sort of kick the life out of the piece of art that they're working on. And then if it's like oftentimes we start with our eyes closed, finger painting to music. And what happens is that first layer, just to kind of break the white canvas thing up, is like that layer is so alive and so unique. And you look around the room and it's like, wow, we were all listening to the same song and had the same instruction, but look at how unique there's your style. You're already here in the room. It's how you move your body, how much paint you put on your fingers, what colors you chose, like all the things are there. It's like, can we move between like full freedom and expression, and then also moving between like, I'm going to make a choice about something and I'm going to add this object, or I'm going to put more of this color on there. And I really think that is another way that this process reflects life, because there are times where being wild and free and completely, just in it is exactly what's needed. And then there's other times where refinement is what moves things forward. And so, yeah, I think of my process as a little bit of a figure eight or an infinity symbol of kind of getting to honor all the parts of ourselves. And that in and of itself is a mindfulness practice, because just deciding, okay, what's needed here? What's needed here in this moment? But what I'm always coming back to in my work is just honesty. Like, can you be honest? Are you being honest with yourself right now? Can you bring more of your truest self? Or are you performing in some way? Or are you, trying to make it quote unquote perfect in some way? And while doing that, can we be kind to ourselves? Can we befriend ourselves through the process of creativity? Because it's an interesting one, because it's like we're creating something that's outside ourselves. And so there's another opportunity there to be able to see what we created, regardless of what we think about it, opinions about it, and just treat it with kindness, treat ourselves with kindness, just for showing up, just for trying. And the process that I work in is all about layering. So it's really wonderful, because if you don't love it, you can keep putting paint on the canvas and like letting it get more and more rich and layered and interesting. But then always coming back to and talking nicely to yourself along the way. And that is such a mindfulness practice, perhaps one of the greatest ones, I think, that I don't know, for myself, I've been working on as I get older. Can I just let all of it be okay? Like, no matter what's happening in any moment, how I'm showing up to something or not showing up to something, can I be nice and friendly to myself and not go down that road of self-destruction that's so easy to do sometimes. So, all right, you did something. just like in life, right? Like we had last week, that went a certain way. We did the first layer, things happened there, and now we get to choose again. And we get to, it's not a blank canvas anymore, right? Like last week happened, and we're building onto that. You know, we have marks, we have color. And so then it's like, but I get a fresh start. And this is like over and over again in this process. And things, and I think why my paintings end up looking embodied or rich is because they have been through some things, you know, like they go through, like people would be shocked, I think, to see the roads they've traveled to get to where they end up because they change radically. Like really, there's many paintings in there because it's that process of building a painting. And the process of building a painting is much like building a life. And so this idea that we're always kind of coming back to the present and that we get to choose again and we get to choose what stays and choose what goes. And hopefully as we, you know, get older and get wiser, we get more in tune with what's real and really who we are and what our greatest desires and what's important so we can, you know, refine the kind of life that we're creating.
I would imagine that if you take, I don't know how many people, 16 people, 50 people, throughout this kind of process over a few days, that they would actually have some kind of life-changing experiences. Do you find that they actually have more than just a painting retreat?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably what I hear the most after my retreats is it's like people aren't even talking about the paintings. They're just like, oh my gosh, like I learned so much about myself and these concepts that we were, again, using, practicing, flexing the muscles in the painting practice are actually the things that people really find value in their life. So concepts like, you know, working with what's working, we talk about that one a lot. And, you know, just all of the practices that connect us to our intuition and really being able to connect in because we're freaking busy out here. You know, we're just trying to keep it together in a lot of ways and like do all the things that need to be done. And so I think that's why this practice is so potent. If you can carve out a few minutes in the morning, you know, just it could be like a blind, eyes closed, quick sketch in a sketchbook, followed by like a little, I call them a poemish, like something like a poem, but no pressure, you know, just like here's a prompt and write something that's like a poem and then do a little drawing. Like there can be these little drops of creativity that make their way, but the more you do them, the more easy it is to connect into that energy. And what that energy is you, right? And so if folks are feeling lost and disconnected from themselves, which I hear a lot, is like, this is a way back home. It's a way back in. And I just really believe we all have exactly what we need already to create and to create our life. When I say create, I mean to create our lives, but also to create, you know, art or whatever, any creative expression. We already have it. It's like we are creative beings. That is what it is to be alive. And so I think of it as just a remembering. And I think, yeah, we're just not in our cultures these days often not taught to prioritize creativity. And I think that it's something that needs to change because that's the realm in which we imagine new worlds. That's the realm in which we step out of the boxes that perhaps have not been working and into new ways of living and being. And I think that we're really in a time as humans on planet Earth where that's what's needed. And so, yeah, to me, it's much greater than just making paintings, you know, it's making a world.
Beautiful.
Is there anything else that you want to share that might help listeners?
Well, I just do want to share that I do have an online community if people are looking for like an access point into some of this stuff, because you know, it might sound good, but then they hang up the podcast and it's like, I don't even know where to start. You know, I do have an online community that is available, and the first week is free if you want to just check it out. We do like weekly live classes and gatherings, and it's painting, but it's also a lot of heart and soul and drawing and creative prompts and movement and somatics, and it's just really beautiful. It's the people that are there, I often hear them say just like how how grateful they are to have that space, and to have the container, because
Yeah.
it's, I think with so many things that are good for us, quote unquote, like things we know we want to do, it's like getting them on the calendar, right? It's like so easy for things like, oh, I want to start painting, but it just always goes off the bottom of the to-do list. That's called free flow. And yeah, I've got a bunch of books too. And yeah, I hope what people take away from this is that they have it. They already have this part of them, and perhaps they have forgotten it for a while, or it might be buried under some things. But if anyone is curious, it's not a big mystery. It's right there waiting for you to tap in and remember.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. So lovely talking to you.
This was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate being here with you.
That's it for us this time. Be sure to check the show notes to connect with Flora and to learn more about her art, retreats and creative community. It's here that you can also learn more about Anna and myself. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could share this podcast with others and help us create meaningful conversations. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.